Let's save us. Let's start rolling. Erik, you got to do you got the intro.
This is it.
No.
All right.
This part may end up. I may edit this in just because I like the rolling
yeah.
start.
No problem.
The beauty of not being live.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we'll go on three.
Well timed, Jack.
That timing's perfect, man. You know, it's kid timing.
It's gonna be a
All
start.
right. Yeah, that's right. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. We have so much to cover, so much to talk about, and we're lucky to have another all-star guest. That's Paul Bannister. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us about what you're doing, and then jump into a couple of really important topics that I think, as Ryan and I were really sort of thinking about the best way to sort of focus the energy and attention on the good hard work that you and so many others.
How do we focus your brain? How do we focus your brain on a couple of things?
Yeah. How do we talk about a couple of real important things that I know are important? I'm getting a lot more questions about them, and we wanted to talk to you about those. So with that being said, I think there's some good subject matter that is sort of deep in the bowels of Twitter sometimes, and they're important discussions. And I know there's a lot of different forums, where, whether the trade pubs, and sometimes those get manicured a little bit, but I want this to be a discussion around, like, your opinion and feelings, and also what you're hearing from others, in the space, other publishers, other companies. So let's kick it off. I saw a couple of tweets, and as I started to read some of the follow-ups in there, there was one in particular too that you and our good friend Jeff Burkett from Gannett were going, sort of talking with each other. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that tweet, or do you want me to actually, I'll tell you about it. So Jeff had mentioned, hey, on the phone call today, and that phone call was with the W3C. Please explain that.
Which we're going to go into a lot more because I don't understand it. W3C said, hey, what's up with this, or no ad tech coming in masquerading as publishers, right?
Yep.
And so there are some publishers present. There's a lot of, helpful tech there present as well. Can you first what is the W3C?
Yeah, so let's even step back even before that and start at the very beginning. We all know, in January of this year, Google came out and said, or the Chrome team specifically said, we're getting rid of third-party cookies just like the other browsers.
Yeah. Mass
chaos, hysteria. We all know that's going to be bad. I don't know if you've looked at your Safari and Firefox CPMs recently, but they're not pretty. And so that's a problem. And as different from the other browsers where Safari and Firefox said goodbye third-party cookies and good luck, Chrome is saying, hey, we're going to get rid of these, but we're actually going to replace it with this whole bunch of complicated technical stuff. And it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be a new internet, and we're going to figure it out together. And by the way, we're talking about this in the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the trade group that basically all standards that all web browsers use run through the W3C. So from literally what is HTML to actually JavaScript may not even be in there, but all these different parts of browsers and the technology in browsers goes to the W3C to get those things approved, and so the browsers can standardize on them. So Google says, come to the W3C and start having these conversations. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And when you get there, and what I wanted is to say, all publishers should be involved in this. They should all be in the W3C. We should all be talking about what's going on. We should, it's our businesses. So it's we should be advocating there and saying, okay, how's this going to work? How's this going to affect what I do? How does this affect my capabilities? How does this affect what advertisers do? Advertisers should be involved in really talking about this. So in the beginning of the year, I was out there saying, we got to all get in there. We got to do it. And now we're in the thick of it, and we're in there. And there's, every week there's a call about the advertising components of these proposals. There's maybe 80 to 100 people on the call, ton of engineers from the Chrome team.
So does anything get done in a call with 80 to 100 people? If I'm in a meeting with more than 5 people, nothing gets done. So like, what's going on with 80 to 100 people on the call?
It is surprisingly well organized. They've got this whole system for queuing where you can talk. The agendas are built in advance. You can't talk out of turn. Like it's pretty well structured, and not as much gets accomplished as needs to get accomplished just because there's so much to talk about. But like it is actually a pretty well run call. And then separately, there's all these proposals are sitting in GitHub, and they're all there for any person to read and look at and comment on and say, I don't like this, and make a counter proposal like Criteo's done with their Sparrow proposal. Rubicon's coming out with a few proposals in the coming weeks. So it's like this stuff is out there, and honestly, more of the conversation even happens in GitHub, where it's like that's where people really write down their position and say like, okay, this proposal doesn't work because of this reason. Here's new things that can be done. Mm-hmm. So these are the conversations that are going on there, but within these calls, heavily Chrome engineers, a few engineers from other browsers, Edge, sometimes Safari, sometimes Brave. I think Firefox. I don't think I've seen a Firefox person, but I may be wrong. Then there's a whole ton of ad tech people on the call, ranging from, I'll say quasi ad tech at like the Verizon's, AT&T's of the world. And then you've got Rubicon, you've got PubMatic, you've got Trade Desk, you've got MediaMath, you've got, a bunch of the other players there, between 1 and 4 people per company. And then you've got a handful of publishers. You've got Jeff from Gannett. You've got a person or two from Washington Post, Jason and Aram usually. You've got Steph Laser from News Corp. You've got me and Andy from our team. And that's about it. There's not really much involvement from other publishers there. We'll talk about that. It's like why is that? And then on the advertising side, I think I've seen 1 Procter & Gamble person and 1 Ford person, and that's it, like ever, in like months of calls now. So at this point, the conversation is browser engineers and ad tech people, and that's it. And that's like, I have no problem with ad tech people representing their interests and also trying to represent the interests of the people that, they work for effectively. But not only can they not really represent the interests of publishers and advertisers, but they're also not trusted. I think the browser engineers are like, you guys have a vested interest in supporting your business, supporting the way things used to work. We want to figure out a new way for things to work, and they want more engagement from, the real stakeholders, publishers and advertisers.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So lots of companies in there, a lot that seem to be missing that have important, very, very important roles. Why do you think it's that way? Like, what do you think?
Why aren't there any publishers?
Yeah, and even also, it sounds like there's no advertisers really either, right? Or anybody there. So just your thoughts on that.
Are we all like too many layers apart from? Like, it kind of makes sense that the tech companies are the most concerned because they're the one, like, they're first hit by this. Is it that? Is it laziness? Is it poor marketing?
I mean, probably. I think you hit a bunch of them. I think it's a combination of factors. I think it's people don't know they can engage. Joining the W3C costs between $10,000 and $50,000, depending on how big of a company you are. So like, there's a financial commitment you got to make to do this. The conversations, like, I'm pretty technical. Like, I have a degree in computer science. Like, I know this pretty well. Like, it is like over my head, some of the conversations that people are talking about. And I think that's daunting for people who come in. So it's like the stakeholders of the publisher are the people on the revenue side, and they're not necessarily going to be, they're going to be semi-technical, but like not, browser engineering technical. Yeah. Exactly. And like, how do you get into that conversation and be a part of that? And then I think also just resources, like, there's these calls to be on, there's all these GitHub things you have to read and understand. And this is one call. So the W3C actually has dozens of working groups within it. This particular one is called the Web Advertising Business Group, but there's another one you have to be involved in called the Privacy Community Group. There's one called the Web Incubator Community Group. There's a subcomponent called TAG, the Technical Architecture Group, that actually turns proposals into standards. There's all these different pieces that you have to sort of try to understand, and you don't need to be involved in all of it, but it's a ton of technical stuff, a ton of process stuff, and it's a big commitment of time. And I think for a lot of publishers and advertisers, it's like, you got to run your business on a day-to-day basis. How do you carve out that time to invest in this kind of thing that you're not sure what it's going to be in 18, maybe in 18 months anyway? But I think it's a lot of reasons.
So not to put you on the spot, but you already kind of showed your hand in a quote in Ad Exchanger. Is anything going to get done? Like there's a lot. Privacy Sandbox is meaty. There's a lot that needs to get done, and a lot of very tricky things that we're going to have to weigh privacy against revenue in a million different ways, and there's a lot of nuance there. Is any of that going to get done?
Yeah, it's a good question. Definitely two sides of the coin. Like, I tend to believe it won't happen in 18 months. I tend to believe it's going to get pushed back to some level. We were saying before, and I said in that Ad Exchanger article, like Chrome is still rolling out the same side cookies change, which is one technical change that's complicated, and they've been working on that for 18 months. Privacy Sandbox is 24 separate proposals that have to be implemented. And like how that gets done in the next 18 months, when most of them are in a pretty philosophical state still, like the real specifics aren't there, that seems really daunting on the one side. On the other side, I think Chrome feels a lot of pressure to fix their privacy issues. And the model they could follow if they wanted to is what Safari and Firefox have done, and just say, we're killing all the tracking and killing all the third-party cookies, and we're not replacing it with all the Privacy Sandbox components. We're going to replace it with these three things that are better than what Safari and Firefox have done, but not much, and add stuff later. Like they could rip the walls down first and fix the other side later is a possibility for them if they feel pressured enough that they have to do that.
Two questions about this. The first, just as my cynical side, when I hear you say that, like, sure, and I'm alluding to a tweet storm you recently had. Mm-hmm. Sure, the Chrome team might like that, but is that a reasonable thing that the search team wants? Like, would that be a palatable thing for Google's own printing like Mint, where they make all of their money is search.
Yeah.
So can you have search and print the amount of money they do without any form of that tracking? Because Apple and Mozilla don't have a business in this structure the same way that Google
exactly
does.
Yeah
So
I mean,
possible?
if I knew exactly what Google was going to do, like, I'm probably in the wrong business. It should be, recommending stock to people or something. They've got a lot of competing pressures on them. Like, partly like if regulatory bodies say like, you've got to fix your privacy issue, and they're forced by governments, like their hand is forced. Like regardless of anything, they don't have a choice. So like that's like on that side pushing them. They've got the other browsers pushing them. Like Apple is like bashing away at them in the press every single day about the fact that they don't protect their users, blah blah blah, whatever. They've got a lot of pressure on that side. I think they want to wait and they want to make it so the open web can make money, but it's really hard to say. Which is why it's so important, I think, to be involved now, because like we never know when this is going to happen, and like let's help figure it out.
Getting with that, being involved, and going back to Eric's original question, philosophically, does it feel right that ad tech is speaking on behalf of publishing? Because those two interests, while sort of aligned, aren't. Ad tech and publishing, in best case, are partial friends. Mm-hmm. But the interest of one, ad tech, just by being a layer removed, doesn't care about the user experience, doesn't care about the end result. And publishing, if you're doing it right, should exclusively care about the end result and exclusively care about the user experience. You're constant, like as a publisher, I'm constantly dealing with this push-pull of like giving the user the best experience, but also still making money. But ad tech doesn't have that tension. They sort of have different competing tensions here, which is like, how do I appear unbiased to either the buy side or the sell side while I'm doing a thing to make myself as much money as possible? Nothing against them. That's just like, that's the tension there. So is it, I mean, I understand there aren't many publishers involved, and it seems like the only publishers involved are those that are like also activist and really strong in the pre-bid org. Like those two things, when I hear the list, I'm like, oh, that's the pre-bid list. So, but ignoring that, like, is it okay for ad tech to be masquerading as publishers?
What do you got? I mean, you kind of said it. Like, I think they got conflicting interests.
I have concerns. I have a lot of concerns that the things that ad tech puts forward, and ad tech I mean, you can even see it in their name, have more engineers to handle this like tough learning curve of just even understanding the conversation that's occurring and going into GitHub and adding comments like that. That's, you need engineers. You just need people. Publishers just are, it's just well known that we don't have many of those. And the ones that we do have are stretched between editorial demands and separate subscription demands, if you have those, and advertising, like it's, and just like the bare bones having a website. So it feels like yes, many publishers aren't involved, but no, we don't actually have the resources to be involved, and we're the ones that are most likely to get hurt or screwed in the end of this. So like, is the W3C even the best forum for this? Or like I feel so fucking handcuffed. Like when I hear this, I'm so frustrated because like I have opinions about this stuff, but I'm gonna need like a translator to like help me figure out what did that person say. Like it feels like this has to be a UN meeting in which I have like something in my ear and someone's explaining to me what the person just said.
Or maybe, so like, or maybe it's kind of in the UN already. You know what I mean? And it needs to move out to, you know.
Yeah, well, that, I would. I mean, maybe just the Security Council size, not the general UN. But
one funny, you guys may work more internationally. I don't do a lot of work with international companies, but within the W3C, I've learned that basically all phone calls are at 11 a.m. because it's 8 Pacific, or sorry, 11 a.m. Eastern. It's 8 Pacific, 11 New York, you know, 4, 5, or 6 in Europe, and then it's like 11 o'clock p.m. in Asia. So it's like, it's kind of the only time of day where basically everyone is awake and can be online. And I'm like, 11 a.m., there you go. That's the time of day. But sometimes 12, but usually 11.
It's interesting. I was thinking, you know, I wrote down, Paul, just kind of like, you know, all the barriers for, you know, I'm talking about participation, you know, just on a larger scale, and some of the roadblocks, you know, that are there, that, you know, it's tech, you know what I mean? And understanding the tech and all the things that come with that. It's time, right? It's like, you know, there's a lot of time. And then there's money, you know, cost, money. And I just wrote right next to it, it's interesting. If you don't get involved, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time and some, you know, or resources and time and people. And it's going to cost you tech in some way too, to not know what you're managing. It's a really interesting thing to sort of think about that way. Right.
You know? One thing, I think, Brian, you said a couple of things that I think like buried in what you said is sort of like, I won't say the answer, but maybe a piece of the ansanswer. Publishers, it's going to be hard. No, there's a lot of good truth in your statement. Like it's going to be hard for publishers really to get involved in a way that is going to make a difference. Adtech has the resources and the technology people and the understanding to make a difference, but they're not. Like I don't want to say they can't be trusted, but like, how can you trust them? And I think part of it is like, how do all publishers, like publishers are you're talking to your exchanges every week, and those people are in the W3C, and it's like, how do we make it so, hey guys, like I don't want my QBR. I want you to tell me what's going on in the W3C. I want you to tell me what your positions are, how that's going to affect my business. Let me tell you what matters to me, and give them that feedback to help them refine what they're doing. And like, as best as possible, try to use them as advocates for what you need, because they're there and they've got the resources, and like they want to protect, you know, your business. It's, you know, sometimes going to be secondary, but if they don't even have the information, they can't do it the right way. So I do think it's really important to communicate with them and push them to be your advocates.
Well, at risk of being an XKCD like cartoon in reality, it feels like we need to, like, publishers need some sort of consortium. We have them, they suck. We need to get better at it, in which we don't allow some like third party layer to be the gel that binds, and we actually just need to get ourselves together. Because it feels like, if I have a conversation with my like Rubicon person or my OpenX person, like, hey, I don't know their level of power. Like, I can't get basic stuff done by them. How am I supposed to trust that I'm going to get like a forceful push in the W3C? And how would I even check? Like, how do I even know?
That's a good point.
But okay, so we're doing a lot of, feels like preaching to the choir. So I don't want to, before we bemoan our fate too much, I would love to just know from you, reading the tea leaves, like understanding all the things that you just said. It's 24 independent things and they're having trouble just getting same site. It's 2022. What has occurred? Like where am I? Or me as a publisher, like what do I need to be like actually preparing for?
Yeah.
In order to get, like, can I trust that there's any form of identity solution at all available? Should I like just assume the worst and that like my Safari CPMs are going to be my everything CPMs, in which case like the house is burning and this is fine. Like what is it?
Yeah. I do, the path we're going down, I think is the right path. And I think it's what a lot of people are doing. It's diversify. Like probably assume privacy sandboxes are in some form and it's okay. It solves some problems. Probably assume that some identity solutions have some scale and you've got some amount of logged in users that you can authenticate and you can get better CPMs on. That's a piece of it. Every publisher who's out there is working on like how do I diversify into non-advertising revenue, whether it's subscriptions or events or merchandise or affiliate or whatever it is. Like what are my other revenue streams, and just keep building that way and kind of assume that programmatic today, even and direct sales is sort of a question mark. What's going to happen? Like that could actually go up significantly. So like that's a potential option. But programmatic, open market in particular, like it's probably going to take something of a hit. It's probably somewhere between 0 and 50%, which is not helpful at all. But it's a pretty wide range. So it's like I think
that's a terrifying number.
Exactly.
I mean, at least again, there are some publishers, we're one of them, that have a decent direct sold business, and we have diversification. Though like even diversification doesn't work great anymore when live events is gone in the age of Corona.
That was a big sort of filler or replacement. Right?
Well, that's what everyone is like. That was a great sign of diversity. Plus, it also gave you more ways to talk for media with advertisers, all of those things. It feels like nothing is safe. But yeah, it feels like some of the companies that have done absolutely best in the past 5 years are those that really doubled down in getting their data team right and really like having we'll call it 85-95% programmatic revenue, and just like really got good at the numbers and paid attention to their margin on and their their win rates, their participation rates, their densities at such micro levels. The notion, like, so if you're playing that really tight fine game and the notion that like just I don't know, let's say best case scenario 20% falls out, like that's devastating for a lot of very smart, very sophisticated publishers.
And I think it's possibly going to hurt the ones that are smartest at the numbers more, because a lot of the publishers who will do best, I think, are the ones that are going to have, and you said this, like the best first party data. Like if you actually know a lot about your customers and you got really good context, and you actually can say, I was looking at something the other day. It's like we've got a bunch of content around like buying a stand mixer, like buying small appliances in your kitchen as an example. It's like that's really good contextual data that KitchenAid or Whirlpool or whoever actually wants. Like that's really good. If you don't have a lot of contextual data or can't identify it and turn that into segments for people, like that's going to be tough. So I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of the 20% might be the average, but like some people might be 5% and some people might be 40%. It's going to be a big gap depending on what you know about your customers and how you can package that up for advertisers.
I was just thinking, and I was writing down here, and I always do this when we start thinking about all the things that we need to do. I always just write out how much time is left this year. And then, next year will be here before we know it. I mean, we're already in Q3. Q4, it's really hard to get a lot of folks to do things.
Are we really in Q3?
Right?
Fuck.
Banana cakes. Banana cakes, right? So, and we're coming right off of, sort of the sort of rocky periods of COVID. Some went up, some went down, some were okay. But depending on the type of publisher you are, I mean, it could be good, or it could be just starting to get good again, or you see improvement. So it might be, there's like a recovery process for some publishers and for some folks. And so we're going to spend most of Q3 trying to figure out how to maybe set up the best Q4 you could possibly have, or replace some of the, we talked about the revenue from events and things like that just aren't going to be there anymore. And a lot of publishers, have internal pressure to just say like, well, I don't know, I don't care. We got to figure out how to make up the revenue anyways, right? Or whatever the case may be. Then Q1 comes around, right? And depending on the type of publisher you are, you either have a good Q1 or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're right back into, what I keep calling sort of just like the shot clock. I mean, it's the clock is running. And what are your thoughts on just how to spend the best next year, on how to tackle some of this? Because I think it's daunting from all the things that you shared, which is really insightful, from participating in the W3C, but also it's daunting internally for publishers to figure out who takes ownership of this,
Yeah.
right? Like where does that reside? And so how do you think the next year sort of plays out, or in terms of what are some recommended ways for folks to kind of get moving, because I think the complexities of it sometimes, like, you feel paralyzed or you freeze up, and you say, I don't know what to do. So any thoughts there, Paul?
It's a tough question, right?
I know, sorry, yeah, didn't even put you on the spot, but I was just sitting here writing down, like, literally our quarters, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's
2021, and it's just crazy, and 2022 will be here, before you know it,
yeah,
just,
yeah. We had our board meeting like 3 days after Google announced the Death cookie in January, and like I always use that as like a pivot point in my brain, and our next board meeting is next week, and we already had one other. We have them quarterly, and I'm like, I'm gonna have 8 board meetings between the announcement and it happening.
Yeah, right.
2 are gone as of next week, and it's like,
amazing,
oh
yeah.
wow, and like you just like the time goes by, and COVID messed up everything, but
right,
and that's not over anytime soon as far as I can tell. And you're right, the time just goes by, and I think, probably part of the good thing is, aside from Privacy Sandbox, which is complicated and how to deal with that is a sticky issue, the rest of it is like, if you're doing your job right, you're diversifying your revenue. You're looking into your first party data. You're looking at identity solutions. You're looking at, like, how can I make my business stronger with standards? And you're doing those things anyway. And, so to some level, the answer is hopefully you're doing the right things right now. And you just got to double down, focus on those things, keep pushing forward. I do think it's, to the point of the Privacy Sandbox, though, on the other side, I talked about, like, working with your ad tech companies, like, I've, put the word out, like, talk to me, like, I'm there, like, talk to Jason at Washington Post or staff, and like, give your feedback to those people. And like, maybe it's even worth like doing some kind of, big Zoom where we all get on, explain what's going on, and give people information and get their feedback, and like, how do we like gather information from people in a useful way? I don't know the right way to do it, but like I'm happy to be an advocate.
Don't steal our job. This is what we're doing.
Hey. No, but that's a great idea, Paul. No, I mean.
Okay, so in line with what Erik was just asking, so I actually don't know, and to keep this brief, I actually, you're not a salesperson, so I don't have to try to keep you too brief, but you get to see the market as across various different types of publishers. I assume you have some amount of like hard news or news groups, plus you have like, travel or like really specific ones. Have you noticed anything insofar as like you've had kind of an interesting view, like broad view of the macro ecosystem as Corona has gone through? Yeah. Are you seeing rebounds in places, even though like, yeah, they might, let's say it was travel. I don't know, maybe travel rebounded, but it's easy to rebound from zero. So maybe are you seeing rebounds or anything like that, or anything that like, if I'm a publisher and I don't have this view, would be just good for those of us to know? Like, I'm in hard news. I'm generally aware of most of the stuff, but I'm super curious about like the peripheral stuff that may be a signal or a canary in the coal mine that like things are about to either get good or real bad. Yeah.
So it's interesting. We have pretty decent coverage in like, I think like 12 or 13 different verticals. Most are pretty lifestyle-y. And the good thing about a lot of lifestyle verticals is like the traffic was, and continues to be, like, it spiked enormously during coronavirus, like food traffic.
Stuck at home, you got to get a hobby.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you got to cook, you got to DIY at home, you got to homeschool your kids. Even the travel stuff was interesting. So, travel traffic wasn't up as much, but like a lot of the travel sites pivoted into different things. Like there were whole things around like, Disney World empty, and all these pictures were enormous. Like people were looking at that and like, what to do with your miles, and like, like when will the airports be open again? And if you are traveling, like how to be safe, and like all this stuff. But like there was a ton of interest in it. So it was pretty interesting to see. and I'm, curious for, on the real hard news side, we've got some coverage there. It's not our biggest thing, but even those verticals did pretty well from a traffic perspective, because I feel like good quality content, people were at home more and they were reading more and they wanted to stay up to date on what was happening. I'm like, so the traffic in a lot of cases counterbalanced bad stuff going on CPM side.
Yeah, I think at least on the hard news side, for a good long while, despite the fact that the market fell out and just was nowhere, your traffic sort of floated you beyond there. Where now I've seen in talking to other publishers getting to the place where like people are no longer compulsively going to news sites as much as they were before. So it feels like page views have sort of reverted back to the mean much quicker than the CPMs or the rest of the market. Doesn't help that we just ended the first half of the year, and so it's usually soft in July anyway. But yeah, I was curious about that. And then and
also too, Ryan, with the hard news cycle too, I mean, just thinking like sometimes it's really hard to think also about like this year being an election year, and just depending on whatever's happening with the contextual stuff, right? There's like stuff that'll
it's going to be insane, and we're about to have conventions, or maybe we're going to have conventions.
Right.
Hopefully there'll be a little bit more. Wait, this way, right? but yeah,
you want up and to the right.
The one good trend we've seen on the CPM side is like, we do a lot of comparisons year over year. And we've adjusted for a bunch of different things to see what it is. I'm like, March 15th onwards, like you couldn't compare anymore. Like it was just nonsense, like crazy stuff that you didn't have anything to base it on. And in the last couple of weeks, and even now into July, like I feel like we're able to actually watch the trends and be like, okay, things from like a week over week, month over month trending thing compared to last year, things are starting to look like, okay, I can actually like the trends seem to be looking the same. Looks like advertisers are sort of like reacting the same way than they have in the past, which is good. CPMs in all cases might not be back to where we want them to be, but like they're moving in the right direction. So it's like, okay, knock on wood, like this could be okay. But then you got, I don't know, what 68,000 people yesterday got diagnosed with COVID. And it's like, if there's this huge new spike, does that cause another big dip? Like, we don't know. Like those are the big question marks. It feels like the market today feels okay, but that could change next week.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask you this with hope that it's a 30-second answer, but who knows? Ask this of Jay and Steph, so I'll ask it of you.
Yeah.
Just, I'm not sure, and I don't, if you have a bunch of yield bona fides, I apologize for not knowing them ahead of time. But you're saying that computer science strikes me that you're probably at least like knee deep in the data. So what if you had to give publishers a trick, or not even a trick, no, a tip on what to pay attention to going forward that may not be obvious? Just like the thing that Steph's was paying attention to the delta between the high bid and the second highest bid. That to her was more important than just the net revenue she was receiving. Jay's was like, you should have done your job already, so let Jesus take the wheel, which I actually really agreed with. But so then along those lines, like let's say I'm not either any of us, but let's say I'm a person at a mid-sized publisher. I've been doing, I somehow took on the yield part of this. I'm on year 2 or 3 of learnings. Like, what should I be focusing on going forward, knowing all of the insanity that is to come? Like, how do I just solidify this?
Right. I think Steph and Jay will have better specific things than I have, but like two thoughts that come to mind for me. One is, if you're doing video, VAS errors, like you got to dig into that stuff every day like crazy. Like it is the number one source of lost money, and really understanding like which exchanges are giving you VAS errors, what creatives is it, getting those things out of there, really figuring out watching that stuff is huge. Like the differential could be 10, 20, 30% on your video revenue if you are not watching it closely versus are watching it closely. So like I would say that. And the other thing,
huge.
just a plug, I'm sure Steph, I watched Steph and I know she plugged it a lot, but like pre-bid, these days, like there's so much development going on there. Make sure to keep your pre-bid up to date. Like the new versions coming out every week are like, everything has got new yield improvements. Everything has got like, is really focused on it. Patrick on our team is on the board of pre-bid, and he's a massive yield guy, and he's just sitting there with the adtech engineers, like, change this to this, push this way, whatever. And like, if you keep that up to date, you're getting the latest and greatest yield ideas, like just out of the box. So it's like, I would make sure you're pushing forward on getting your engineers to keep pre-bid up to date.
I think that is the perfect way to wrap this, Paul. Thank you very much for taking time out of your Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely.
if I have my life together, I'm not going to take a month between editing this and posting it. So we should see it up while this information is all fresh for everyone. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, thanks for hanging with us, man.
Yeah, enjoy the weekend.
Right.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Bye.